Jackson Dart with a concussion, Daniel Jones on the bye week. If you're looking for a replacement for them, you're in the right place. Tyler Shuck on a bye. If you're looking for a replacement for him, your team's probably already cooked. Headliner Nation, this Thursday, we are going to get one of the worst quarterbacks over the last several weeks versus one of the best quarterbacks over the last several weeks. Drake Maye is an MVP candidate. Justin Fields is a candidate just to potentially even have a job the rest of the season. Over the last 4 weeks, Justin Fields only has one game where he has thrown for more than 55 yards. It was when he threw for 244 against the defense that can't stop anybody, Cincinnati. Outside of that, 3 games with fewer than 55 passing yards. Only one of those games did he leave early. Also, the rushing ability that typically brings a solid floor, and one of the reasons why people love Justin Fields for fantasy football, that hasn't been there either. He doesn't have a rushing touchdown since week 4 of the season. Drake Maye is an MVP candidate right now, and he gets a great matchup against the New York Jets, who coming into this game are allowing the 9th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And they just traded their top cornerback and one of their best defensive linemen. It's just going to make things even that much easier for Drake Maye this week. Hopefully I didn't just jinx it because it is Thursday Night Football and anything can happen. But over the last 5 games, Drake Maye has been a top 12 quarterback 4 times. I don't love the fact that he has an interception in 3 straight games, but he might clean it up this week. Marcus Mariota versus Tua, and I'm sure that's exactly what the people in Spain were hoping for when they bought their tickets earlier in the year. I joke. Marcus Mariota played well last week against the Detroit Lions. Threw for 213, a couple of touchdowns, no interceptions. He's really not that bad of an option this week. Miami allows the 8th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and Washington, with as bad as their defense is played at times, they could see themselves in some negative game script a majority of the day. And that's one of the reasons why I gotta list Tua as a fringe start this week, because the Washington Commanders are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. He was the quarterback 8 against the Atlanta Falcons. And then he gets a prime matchup against Baltimore and finishes as the QB 25. And then he jumps back up to QB 18 against Buffalo. There's really no rhyme or reason, it feels like, with Tua. Over the last 3 games, he has 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. It seems like he's playing better, but there's always the possibility the wheels will fall off. Bryce Young is a sit, once again going up against Atlanta this week. Atlanta is allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and Bryce Young has not finished any higher than QB 23 in his last 3 games. On top of that, he only has 2 top 12 performances all season long. Michael Penix is a fringe top 12 option for me. Carolina is allowing the 10th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and they've had some solid games as of recent as well. Like Jordan Love a couple of weeks ago, wasn't really able to get anything going against these guys at home. Michael Penix, hopefully at home, he can get something going this week. He has not thrown an interception since week 4. So even though we haven't seen a ton of consistent upside, a ton of consistent floor has been there. Baker Mayfield versus Josh Allen, and this game should be a ton of fun to watch. Baker Mayfield looked a lot better last week. After a couple of down performances, he was all the way back up at QB7 against a pretty tough defense. He's going to have another tough task this week. Buffalo allows the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. But what I love the most, Baker Mayfield has 16 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions this year. And Josh Allen, if you're here looking for a breakdown on Josh Allen, I really think that you need to be looking at the rest of your team. Josh Allen obviously is a start. For Houston and Tennessee, the big question is going to be whether or not CJ Stroud will be cleared to play this week. And as of this recording, he has not been cleared as of yet. If Davis Mills were to start again, I don't know if I'm going to risk it in back-to-back weeks. What in the world was that from David Mills last week? The dude had more passing yards than inches on his neck. If CJ Stroud were to play this week, he'll be a fringe start for me. If you really feel like you need to play Davis Mills again, all power to you and best of luck. Not only does Houston allow the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but the last time Cam Ward faced them, he only completed 10 of 26 passes, barely eclipsed 100 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. Chicago's going to get their opportunity for revenge last week after J.J. McCarthy broke their hearts back in week 1. Who will be the better quarterback this week? The hottest quarterback right now is obviously Caleb Williams. He has back-to-back weeks as a top 5 quarterback, but the 2 previous weeks to that, he was the QB 20 and the QB 27. We had some up and down performances from him all year long, and Minnesota's defense is clearly a tough defense to play against. Against Chicago in week 1, JJ McCarthy did not look like a starting quarterback for a majority of the game, and then that fourth quarter came and he turned it on, and we've seen bits and pieces of that type of performance all season long. JJ McCarthy did have a couple of interceptions last week. Not both of them were on JJ McCarthy. Justin Jefferson, you need to take a look in the mirror as well, my man, because you definitely gave up on one of those. JJ for me is a fringe start. Chicago's allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Jordan Love has not looked great the last couple of weeks, but now he gets a really solid matchup going up against the New York Giants, who allow the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. They also are making a switch at the head coaching position this week, and you gotta hope and pray that Jordan Love will showcase some top 12 upside in this matchup. It sounds like Jackson Dart will not be playing this week, as it was mentioned earlier today that Jameis Winston should be starting in week 11. And there's one thing that we can say about Jameis Winston. This dude could throw for 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. He could throw for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Whatever it may be, we know one thing. He is going to absolutely sling it. A couple of weeks ago against Chicago, we didn't even know if Joe Flacco was going to be able to play after spraining his AC joint. Not only did he play, but he was the quarterback 2 on the week. Since coming to Cincinnati, he's been the QB 15, 6, 7, and 2. And against this same team just 3 weeks ago, he was the quarterback 6. We're going to fire up Joe Flacco once again. And Cincinnati is allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers threw for 4 touchdowns the last time these two teams played. Rodgers has not looked great as of late, but in this matchup, he absolutely could. Justin Herbert has a great opportunity to be back inside the top 12 quarterbacks with a matchup against Jacksonville this week. Jacksonville is currently allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And even though Herbert finished as the QB 17 last week, he had 3 straight performances inside the top 5 right before that. Being inside the top 12 this week should definitely be an opportunity. Trevor Lawrence had a tough matchup last week, and he gets another tough matchup this week, going up against Los Angeles, currently allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. And if Trevor Lawrence isn't running for touchdowns, then he doesn't have any upside. The Seahawks and the Rams will get an opportunity to meet up for the first time this season, and Sam Darnold in some tough matchups has played well this year, but the Rams are going to be another tough test he has to pass. Right now, they're allowing the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but hopefully a lot of neutral game script and not really playing too far ahead will allow him the opportunity to put up some decent volume even if it is a tougher matchup. Matthew Stafford has 3 straight games inside the top 8 quarterbacks, and he now has 5 performances on the season inside the top 8 quarterbacks. It doesn't matter who he's playing, Matthew Stafford is playing at an MVP level right now. At this point, I'm just going to assume Mac Jones will end up starting the rest of the year for the San Francisco 49ers. Maybe we see Brock Purdy, but based on what we've heard from the coaching staff, I don't think they even know when he might come back. This week, San Francisco against Arizona. Arizona is allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks right now. Mac Jones had 319 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception, and a losing effort last week. And this week, I still think he has the potential for some top 12 upside, even if the matchup is a little bit tougher on paper. I don't think there's anybody in the NFL at this point that deserves the "Where in the hell did you come from" award more than Joe Flacco. But if there is somebody that's going to give him a run for his money, it's got to be Jacoby Brissett. He's been the quarterback 7, 12, 10, and 10 over the last 4 games for Arizona. I have no idea what has gotten into this guy, but not only is he playing fantasy caliber football right now, but he's making everybody around him fantasy viable as well. Trey McBride owners, you should be sending a little bit of a donation to his charity of choice after you win a championship this season. Jacoby Brissett gets a matchup against San Francisco, allowing the 10th most fantasy points per game. He'll be missing Marvin Harrison Jr., which does knock him down to a fringe start for me. Does anyone else find it wildly convenient that Kyler Murray went on the IR just a week before the new Call of Duty came out? At this point, if Kyler Murray isn't careful, he's going to lose his job to Jacoby Brissett, and Kyler Murray may as well just get his offseason started early. It might do him some good to put down the controller though, and maybe pick up some golf clubs, and if he does that, he's probably going to have to clean them up a little bit. It may have been a while since he played last. Caddy Splash is exactly the people that can help him out with that. And listen, my golf game isn't all that great, but I definitely love to look the part. And if people are going to be laughing at the way I swing the club, I don't want people laughing at the way my clubs look. And that's why I keep Caddy Splash in my bag, so I can keep all of my clubs cleaned up and looking great all of the time. And they have so many great products over at Caddy Splash, you need to go check them out for yourself. Whether you're a golf enthusiast or if you just find yourself out a few times a year, Caddy Splash is exactly who you need to have in your bag. And right now, our viewers get 15% off of your order when you use code Headliners at checkout over at caddysplash.com. For Baltimore and Cleveland, you're going to be playing Lamar Jackson. It's not the best matchup in the world. Cleveland's allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. So you're not going to feel easy about this matchup all week long, but you've already missed Lamar Jackson enough this season, you're not going to consider sitting him from somebody else. Dillon Gabriel hasn't been all that bad. He hasn't been great, but I think he's about what he is at the NFL level. He might end up being a career guy who is a backup. He's going to come in and play some games and do okay, maybe more of a game manager. Doesn't have the biggest arm in the world, even though he did have a nice pass to Jerry Jeudy last week. And there's still talk about Shedeur Sanders and whether or not he's going to take over for Gabriel at any point in time. Right now, this entire Cleveland team for me is a mess outside of Quinshon Judkins. Kansas City versus Denver. In this game, I've said it in really all the start and sit videos, could end up turning out to be a defensive match more than an offensive match. Denver's allowing the 2nd fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks right now. And before the bye week in week 9, Patrick Mahomes had only his 2nd game of the season where he didn't finish inside the top 6 quarterbacks. I think you might find him outside the top 6 once again this week, but I still think he has top 12 potential. Bo Nix has 4 interceptions in the last 3 games, and he was terrible last week. And if you would like to make a case for him being more of a fringe start this week, I absolutely get it. But I do think he ends up bouncing back, and I do think he plays a lot better. The key this week against Kansas City is I believe Bo Nix has to use his legs, and that is where I think he could end up making up some of those points if he's not great through the air. Detroit versus Philadelphia on Sunday Night Football, and Jared Goff has been playing very underrated football once again this season. But in this matchup against Philadelphia on the road, we know this is one of those matchups where he has a little bit of a lower ceiling. And I do think that this game is going to be controlled on the ground with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. They'll take some shots down the field, and he might connect a couple of times with Jameson Williams, and he'll have some good connections with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, but it doesn't mean that he's going to find the end zone multiple times this game, and it also doesn't mean he's going to throw for a ton of yards. Jalen Hurts didn't look like himself against Green Bay last week, but he's coming back home to a pretty good opportunity against Detroit's defense. They're getting healthier, which is great, and historically, they have not done a great job at stopping running quarterbacks. So Jalen Hurts this week for me still has a decent amount of upside. He's going to take advantage of some plays in the secondary. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith will probably each see a couple of big plays themselves, and he's more than likely going to score a rushing touchdown. Dallas at Las Vegas on Monday Night Football, and we're going to be starting Dak Prescott coming out of the bye against a pretty poor defense at times. I'm all on board with Dak Prescott being a high upside play for us once again. CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens should absolutely terrorize this defense. For the Las Vegas Raiders, here's the issue: Geno Smith. Do you want to play him against one of the worst, if not the worst defense in all of football, especially against the pass? Right now, Dallas allows the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Geno Smith has not been good this season, and Dallas did do a couple of things to try and upgrade their defense, but their secondary is still going to be shoddy at this point. And if you're looking for an emergency option to try and go with this week, then streaming Geno Smith isn't the worst opportunity in the world. Headliner Nation, there you have it. All the start and sit videos are in the books, and hopefully you have started to form your lineups and you're feeling really good about your matchups this week. Make sure you tune into the rankings videos to get all of the updates that we have throughout the rest of the week, and hopefully you all experience tons of fantasy success in week 11. Hype the video, like it, subscribe, bell notifications, comment, all the good stuff. Appreciate you all. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.